a leader today, going in on Monday, let's just say, consider this week as a write-off, but you want to start a fresh week next week. With that ethos of connection and creativity, what's the first thing they should be thinking about or looking to change?
I think number one, you have to go in and dispel the fear that AI is going to replace people. I do think AI will have some replacement level, but it will create new jobs. Now is the opportunity for people to take on that learning so that they're in those roles, or so that their role evolves with AI. So that would be the first thing as a leader that I'd want to convey. The second thing would be that there is no better time than now, which means we have to experiment, and we have to experiment quickly, and we have to know what we're trying to solve and start with small things. Start with small things. You don't have to go so big. But the reality is, if you make small impacts across the organization, you are going to transform the organization. I would also say that equally as important in any of these decisions, if you're going to bring in new technology, new tools, or try to augment what you're currently using, is change management, product design, and then training.
Change management, yeah.
Big time. I think it has to be planned for, because you're talking about the biggest transformation in the history of mankind.
But it has been a while since we've seen each other, right? I can't even remember the last time.
Yeah, other than maybe a video call over the last year, it's been a minute.
And that was for work. And even before that, I think the last time I saw you was in Liverpool Street in our gig at Hipster.
Yeah.
I think back then, or was it Curiously?
Curiously.
It was one of them, right?
Yeah.
Which came first? Because
Curiously, yeah, I think so. I can't remember now, but
it was one of them too.
They were
Yeah,
both about the same time.
yeah, because I followed you from there to there.
Yeah, but Curiously was London based, so that makes sense.
That's right.
Yeah.
Man, Charles, welcome to Brew Bytes, by the way.
Thank you.
Brew Bytes, which is in New York of all places.
Very cool.
Yeah, and love the fact that you're here. It's been way too long, and I've known you for, I think, a good part of over a decade now.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I think you were working on the agency side, and we were able to pull you to the dark side to start selling some solutions.
You did, and actually, how you pulled me to the dark side was from Cannes.
Yeah,
I met you in Cannes, right?
That's right. We've had a good go, meeting in the south of France, hanging out in London, now New York City. I do got to get to Dubai though.
That's right. You have to come out to Dubai at some point. I think over the years, though, you've been talking a lot about connection and creativity, which today we're going to stress test. Right?
Okay.
We're going to stress test this out, see how your I think your new approach to things is panning out, especially in a world where teams and culture and with AI coming in, is really changing the dimension of a lot of things, right?
Yeah.
I mean, I even see this in New York. I have this sense of feeling that tech is becoming bigger than it was before. Mm-hmm. Whether it's you go into the hotel, you go order something. For example, today I went to get an acai bowl, and the guy says, he could have served me, but he says, can you just put it into... I was like, hold on, what's going on here, right? It's creativity, but where's the connection going to say, hey, welcome, what can I get you? So different, right? And I'm feeling that a lot more and more and more. Do you feel it? Like,
oh yeah. I mean, you see it everywhere. And look, I think the reality is now you're at a point in time where the rise of AI, the speed at which it's coming, companies are going to take the opportunity to automate whatever they can, right? So you talk about, QSR experiences like you're talking about, that's already underway. I mean, you have, I think McDonald's and a couple other restaurants have automated services now where you don't have anybody in the store. So you're going to see a little bit of that, but the human connection, I think mobile did away with that a lot. I think people have a hard time looking people in the eye. Go order a coffee and see if someone pays attention and looks at you. It doesn't usually happen.
that's so true. That's true. Growing up, were you ever tech obsessed?
Tech obsessed. I don't know that I would say I was tech obsessed. I my family didn't have a lot of money, so I did have a lot of friends that I went to school with that had the early Apple computers, and they were, I think, much more obsessed with new technology than I was as a kid. But I do remember our first computer. I do remember early days of chat rooms, and I think the thing that I remember the most about the change in technology coming at consumers quickly was seeing the first .com commercials, right, on television, and realizing, okay, wait a second, they're now advertising pages on an internet that I don't know much about, this is obviously going to be big. So I do remember that. And that was probably a big turning point.
So TV advert got you tech obsessed.
Yeah, I think TV just made me pay attention to what was happening. And I think, when I think about myself and my career being 20 plus years in the media and advertising technology industries, I've always tried to play at the front of the curve, like where are things going next? And for me, that big moment was video.
Video.
Yeah, I mean, really entering the industry at a time where, websites didn't even have video players yet, right? And that was very early days in sort of the shift, right? You had the initial big shift to the internet, and then you had a shift from textual display content into video content.
Today, it's all about connection and creativity. So let's just park the nostalgic stuff to a side now. I think we've kind of done all this now. And let's really understand where connection and creativity is coming from. And we're going to be talking about this quite a lot today. I think what I get the feeling because when we had our call, we were talking about connection and creativity, and it was you that who'd mentioned it. And it actually got me thinking a lot more, which is the fact with tech on the horizon that we're losing this connection and people feeling a lot more lonelier than ever before. We talk about like the whole well-being scenario of businesses and organizations trying to sort of, instill empathy around well-being in individuals. But I just feel like with tech just growing like a venom, essentially it's like a venom now with AI. You mentioned it just before we started the shoot, which was like, you can't just put it back in now, right? It's out there now.
The genie's out of the bottle.
Exactly. But it must be creating a sense of loneliness in people, right?
I mean, look, I think like if you go back a decade plus, and I'm trying to think of the exact timing, the internet's promise to connect people was like a primary focus, right? If you looked at India and other parts of the world, it was like, this is the thing that's going to connect people. And then mobile became the accelerant to then connect people even further. And it was a matter of infrastructure within those countries in order to get people on the same type of speed and be able to download the same type of information, whether it's video, et cetera. So that part of technology did connect people. The reality today, and I'll cite mobile, but we'll talk about AI too. I think people are far less connected than ever before.
Far less.
And I think that what's happened is social media, mobile devices, infinite scrolling, maybe specifically as a developed feature, have put people into their own individual worlds again.
I was doing some work with Middlesex University out of Dubai, and one thing that we were discussing was separated connections. I just wish I had this presentation to show you, right? But
yeah,
I don't need a presentation. But what separated connections spoke about, which was on a few fronts. The first being is there's just a wealth of different touch points that we have as human beings. Forget about being a consumer for just a moment now.
Like an overwhelming amount.
Overwhelming. Yeah. Like you've got
100%.
WhatsApp, Instagram, you've got TikTok, X. What else have we got out here now?
Facebook.
We have Facebook. We have got even include ChatGPT now as another space. Yep. So separated connections gaming platforms. Yep. You're on the tube or in this case in the subway. You're gaming, or basically you have these separated moments. And what happens is your separated moment starts from the minute you wake up until the minute you get back home, where you might afford 3 or 4 hours of family time. But even with that, that's a separated connection. So throughout your day, you are in the office environment, you're working, you're on WhatsApp, separate connection. You then go on social, separate connection. You then go home, separate connection. Then you go back, and then you have another connection, which is more the human element side. But your day is pretty much consumed of a lot of virtual connections. So I guess what does real connection look like is something that bedazzles me half the time.
I hate to say that. I think the next generation of young people are going to have to redefine that. And if I think about what you just said and put it in the context of my own life, because I have children, right? I have teenage girls, and I'm blown away at watching my oldest, who's a freshman in high school, go from a happy, laughing, smiling, go lucky kid to a kid that has anxiety and depression.
Oh, wow.
And I think that is a root of this connection issue, right? Like I'm sure the statistics exist at least in every major Western country, but in the US, I mean, the rise in depression amongst teenagers is unbelievable. And I will tell you, when I was a kid, all the way probably through into college, I didn't hear the word anxiety or depression. Didn't exist, right?
True.
And partly because we all didn't have this individual device in our hands that put us into so many of these virtual moments or virtual connections like you're talking about, where you're not paying attention to what's happening around you in the real world. And I think, if you look in the research, what social media and infinite scrolling and these types of advances on the negative side, what they do is they create an increase in dopamine. You get a dopamine hit by staying on your device longer. And the real negative to a child or a teenager and a developing brain is that now you require more dopamine to feel joy outside of that experience.
Do you know my nephew?
And that's a problem.
Yeah, it's a big problem because so we went back home for the summer and
Back to the UK.
back to the UK,
Got it, yeah.
And in Dubai, my kids kind of have this approach which is less tech where possible.
Yeah.
But YouTube and eat dinner, you can't get away from it.
Yeah.
But we try to do less of that when it comes to technology. So anyway, I took them back for the summer, and my eldest got akin to YouTube and Roblox. I was like, okay, this is cool, right? My son's getting into Roblox. He could be part of the cool crew with whatever Roblox has got, as in concern-wise. That's one thing. But I thought, okay, this is quite good for him. You learn a different neuro skill, right? This is the whole thing where we think about gaming can sort of help on those neuro skills. So anyway, 6 weeks go.
Pattern recognition.
Yeah. 6 weeks go by, and the kid will not let go of his iPad. Whoa, Yusuf, what's up? I want to play Roblox. I want to play Roblox. I want to meet my cousin on Roblox. I want to keep playing Roblox. I goes, but you've been on it for 8 hours, like off and on. It's insane. No. And then taking the tablet away was in itself going back to early tantrum moments when your kids were young, just dropping themselves on the floor. And he's a 5.5-year-old kid. And he's like, no, I want. No. Then it wasn't until my eldest nephew, who's like 21 or 22, he goes to me, actually, uncle, you know what it is? He needs that dopamine fix, because technology is replacing what would have been another dopamine fix of playing sport or going outside.
100%.
It's interesting you say that. And kids must suffer. You mentioned this, right?
They are. There's no doubt about it. I can
and how are you dealing with that with your one?
I mean, look, and I hate this phrase, but this phrase is kind of true. Like, you have to pick your battles when it comes to your kids. There's a reality that once they're 13, 14, and in some cases younger, but we didn't give our oldest a phone of her own until 13, and we were an outlier. But there's a reality that that's their currency and that's their communication method. And I was sharing this story briefly before we started here, but my daughter went on her first date this past Easter, and I went to the movies with a boy. Now, we relocated, we're in a new town, she's meeting new friends, all that's been working out well for her. And she's been going to school with this kid for 4 or 5 months already. He lives in the neighborhood, nice family. They're on the bus together. They walk home down the street together. He bears right and then she goes left. And so I'm asking her, before the day comes, like, well, what do you guys, what do you talk about? Like, what do you guys say to each other when you're hanging out? And she says, I don't know. We've never spoken a word before.
And what was your reaction? I can imagine.
I just didn't understand what she was talking about, right? I'm like, what do you mean? You're on the bus and you don't say hi, you don't say, how was your ex sport, whatever your activity is? Nope. They only communicate on Snap.
Wow.
And that's it.
Wow.
Yeah. And it's pretty wild because, again, like, this is where I say connection will need to be redefined in some way, because you could say that there's good connection potentially, right? When kids and adults connect online, but then there's just the realities behind the difference between an actual human to human interaction.
I think you're right. But if you were to give advice to anybody listening or watching who, might be going through something similar, not just with kids, though, I think just with tech in general, it does take over our life. One thing that stood out for me when we went to Cannes once, I think you were talking about you had these weekly rituals, or you had rituals that you would do. I think you used to do yoga, right? And you and your other half used to do a lot of like well-being things at that time.
Still do.
Still do, yeah? Okay. You have to give advice to like even people who are a bit tech obsessed. Is there a ritual they can do that has this balance, and can also like, I guess, manage that dopamine effect? Because we all have dopamine, even by just our mobile phone devices.
Yeah, no, it's true. I mean, look, there's a reason why, man, I think every single book you'll ever read about successful people, and I'm actually thinking about Tools of the Titans right now, people that are really successful will tell you that they make their bed every morning, right? And it's not about the action of making the bed. It's about the fact that you have to do things, first of all, ritual-wise, before you ever pick your device up. You need to do things that show that you complete something, to tell your brain that I'm on a path and a task today to complete something.
Yep.
Right? And that's, I think, part of like the programming that you have to give yourself on a daily basis. When people are waking up and their phone is right next to them and they immediately turn to their phone and they're immediately looking at the news and they're immediately scrolling and they're immediately going into their day, I think you miss that opportunity to set that up for yourself. And I think it leads to like an overwhelming feeling of, I have, too many connections and too much stuff to do today. So I always like to start, for me, it's not making the bed, just because that's not me. But for me, it'll sound a little funny, but for me, it's the emptying the dishwasher.
Is it really? Yeah.
So I empty the dishwasher every morning, right?
Nice.
It's part of it is an organizational skill. You're collecting like things, you're putting them away in the right places, and it just gets me going. It just gets me on that mode of like, okay, time to complete tasks. Yeah. With my family, at the end of the day, when it comes to dinner time, and this is changing and evolving as well as the kids get older with sports and stuff, and not everyone's home at the same time. But we often do, very simple conversational game, high-low. And so we ask everybody, what is their low point of the day? What is their high point of the day? And to describe it. And I think those moments are huge to keep connection, at least in the house. I would do that in the workplace too, especially now that we're often on Zoom and stuff like that. When I manage teams, I would ask people, like, what's their high, what's their low? Like, get a non-work thing in there. Just to sort of set tone and have some balance. But there's no doubt that the connection level that you have with people is shifting significantly. And I know we'll talk about AI at some point here today, but the one thing that I would wanted to bring up when it comes to connection is, and I don't remember if it was 2024 or 2023, but if you look at the research on the usage of ChatGPT, right, for consumers, like the number one category is therapy.
Really?
Right.
Wow.
So people are using AI as therapy to be able to ask questions about personal development and wellness and how they're feeling and how they should deal with those feelings. And that's a very telling thing when it comes to connection, that you're relying on technology for that.
I could believe that, because I know some people in my own inner circle who have used it as a means of, they don't want to go to the doctor because it's a journey. They'd rather just do it at their own convenience. And I know we'll come on to it later on, but thinking of industries that are evolving with AI coming in, almost thinking that's kind of a no-brainer why, a hospital or a practice full of doctors are not bringing in AI into the accessibility of doctors that are trained to think like doctors. The alarming thing is when you go into, ChatGPT or others similar to it, and you start asking questions around, your own well-being or your own health, you're relying on something that is being trained by the open web of information that's feeding it to give you the right information, but it's not always. And it has a disclaimer at the bottom, say don't take what I say literally word for word.
Yeah.
But we're falling
Nobody
into the
pays
trap.
attention to that.
No one pays attention to it. Yeah. And now we fall into the trap of where I think it's a generational thing, but I would say the Gen Zs of the world are using ChatGPT in a very different way. But I think for our generations of the millennials and stuff, I think we are more vulnerable of believing what an AI platform would tell us when we talk about, I have a headache, what's the right medication for me? Okay, paracetamol. Then it might start throwing branded names and all sorts of stuff. Or you got something with any other illness. And it becomes more alarming when you think of more chronic illnesses, right? Cancer, arthritis, like those types of things. You do not want to rely on technology to, I think, advocate what you should be, or instructing you what you should be doing.
Sure.
But I just feel the medical profession, I'm sure they are doing, they are most likely using AI for research and things, but I think that having that accessibility of a doctor or advice in that space is almost like a white space that I feel like is still left untouched.
I think, I don't know enough about what's being used yet in the health space, but I think you can see via consumer access that it's not quite there yet, right? And I would assume part of that challenge is you can take any crowdsourced information on the public web and you can take any documentation and research and you can get a pretty darn good answer, I bet, right? But I think the fine tuning of that, so to speak, to use a more technical term, is really, it lies in the actual knowledge of the doctors, right? And the knowledge and how they interpret research, how they interpret the pharmaceutical industry, how they interpret treatment, and what's necessary, and their context and understanding of the individual that they see, right? And this is also, in some ways, and people get this more when they get older, consistency in going to the same professionals matters, right? Because they know you, they know your background, they know your history, they know your genetics, right? So to your point, like, yes, there likely needs to be that edge someplace between doctor and consumer, right? And AI will probably be there at some point, but that's where the missing features come in. It's like, it's going to take, if it ever happens, it's going to take a really long time to be able to take all that context information that's sitting with individuals and actually make that part of your answer or your solution when you're asking AI for something.
Of course.
And by the way, you get hallucinations too, right? We can talk about that at some point. But
do you get hallucinations yourself?
I mean, AI will deliver hallucinations fairly consistently based on the context that it's fed, right? So, and you see that now in at least one major case that I can think of recently, where a teenager committed suicide based on the responses that it was getting from its back and forth with AI, where you can argue maybe the guardrails weren't in place, but the reality is the AI was adapting to the responses of the kid, right? And so eventually the AI realizes that they may want to hear something a certain way.
So they deliver more of an empathetic...
Not necessarily empathetic, but they deliver back the response that the AI felt that the individual might want to hear. And that's look, I'm not the engineer, right? But that is a form of hallucination, right?
Yeah.
And so you'll get that pretty consistently in consumer use of AI. And some of that might just be that sometimes people need to hear what they want to hear.
When they hear, yeah.
Right. And sort of part and parcel of what you were saying before, I also think generally speaking, humans want to have the quickest possible answer without them having to go through much, right? It's always about speed. It's always about convenience. And I think we're at a point in time where AI is going to deliver unbelievable convenience to the point that it could get scary. But maybe convenience isn't always the answer.
Dude, if you want convenience, you should come and check out Dubai. I mean, Dubai in itself, I have to say is thriving when it comes to tech.
Yeah.
And the utilization of tech, mainly when it comes to a household convenience.
Sure.
It's amazing.
Sure.
You can get your groceries delivered within 12 minutes. Literally 12 minutes, right? Not full delivery, but anything that you might need, from cheese to specific sauces or whatever, but in 12 minutes.
Yeah, it's crazy.
In that heat. And recently I was walking through Dubai airport, and they have these tunnel gates now. And these tunnel gates, you don't even take your passport out. There's about 8 cameras. You walk through what just looks like a normal pathway, and it's scanned your face and identity, and right in front of you, there's a screen there that's within a millisecond identified you, and it either gives you a green tick that you've passed immigration, or like a red tick to say we just need to check out a few more information. But this all happens within a few seconds as you just walk in. So everything is, you don't need to touch anything.
Yeah.
And there's advantages there, and it's great
Big
to see.
advantages.
Yeah.
Sure. That's where convenience is good.
Absolutely. And
as long as security isn't compromised, which I would assume
absolutely.
it's not,
So the Middle East in itself, I'm quite grateful to be out there, to be able to witness it firsthand. And
Sure.
the government recently had mandated the fact that schools and universities now need to have an AI curriculum. So from a KG1, pretty much, or KG3, I think it is, they have an AI class now.
Good.
So my son
That's
eventually will have AI. Yeah, absolutely, right. Or you're behind the curve. But you see you see more developed nations that haven't really put that in yet. It's a curriculum that you may have to do at university, but not really in school. The convenience of using AI as a means of, getting information and studying and sourcing stuff in schools is everywhere, right? But to be able to educate on AI and how you could become a developer in AI, or how you could be an engineer, or you could be a creator, and so forth, I think that's super important, because then it gives a different dimension of what is the future utility of AI before it gets out of control. So Middle East has been doing some great work in that sense, and being out here in New York, and which is the US in itself is the heartland of when it comes to tech development, right? Silicon Valley, Mountain View. And it's so exciting to see what's on the horizon from not just the big tech that we always talk about here, but also the blue chip tech that's coming. And, before we sort of go into a bit more detail, I've known you for a lot of time, and this will make sense why I'm sort of parking that for a moment, is by the time that I've known you, you've had a lot of ups and downs, and you've been through a lot of game-changing moments in your career and stuff, even going into a room where you had to convince people, that were just blindsided with what you believed was, or is, in that moment in time, the right thing to do. Just give a short version of that journey, because it connects to what you're doing today that is very tech-heavy, but AI-heavy.
Sure. And I think there's probably a couple of core moments, I think, of what you're getting at. And before I go there, I wrote down one quick note on this convenience piece of technology. I think for consumers, the part that it's going to start to eliminate is this forward planning thinking. And that's where creativity and imagination come in, right? When you have to plan something and plan for something, you're thinking ahead, which means you're visioning ahead, right? You're seeing ahead. That's where I worry a little bit about the convenience of technology. It starts to remove that creativity and imagination. So, from a career perspective, back to this, look, when I think about, again, being early and ahead of the curve in video, I recall being at a closed-doored conference hosted by Nielsen at the time, with every major broadcaster represented, every major cable company in the United States represented, and 3 or 4 major digital-only players, or actually, I think digital-only. AOL, Microsoft, Yahoo being the 3 that I recall. There might have been 1 or 2 other platform companies in there. And I remember the purpose of the closed-door conference was to talk about this shift in television to digital, right? And this is way before streaming apps and streaming services, right? This is short and long-form content on a video player on a website someplace, right? And the going, comment or the agreed sort of position of the cable companies and the broadcaster at the time was that we see smoke, but the house isn't on fire, so to speak. And it was interesting because it was the early days, but it still wasn't that early. It was like, man, like here's your opportunity to get ahead of it. Yet because their P&Ls were so large, they did, and because they didn't feel like the dollars would shift quick enough, they didn't think it was upon them to like push the shift, so to speak, right? Yes, of course, they had churn to deal with on cable, and they had to keep, it was way early before real cord-cutting numbers were coming out, right? Mm-hmm. You know, you fast forward a decade, and every single one of them had to come out with a streaming service, right? And that was all, you know, watch what Netflix is doing. They're eating your lunch on an eyeballs perspective, and then comes plus everything, right?
Yep.
Hulu and Disney and et cetera. Hulu was earlier, but so you know that was an interesting moment of like trying to paint the picture, but knowing that you're early and trying to convince people that early adoption is good, right? Now, again, I didn't sit in their chair. I didn't have the same problems they had, right? I had the luxury of only looking forward and not looking back,
Yep.
if that makes sense. So I vividly remember that experience and being somewhat confused by their neutral like position of like, I'm not really going to do anything. Just
Don't take chances, basically.
Yeah, don't take chances. Too risky. And granted, I think you could probably say that maybe everything works out and, you know, their businesses shift and they're fine. Most of them paid way too much probably for the technology they needed to acquire because they waited too long, and they probably could have picked up the tech for streaming for 100 million instead of 600 million or $1 billion, right? So, you know, maybe that's some of the impact.
Yep.
If I think about early days in influencer marketing, you know, I was at Maker Studios post-acquisition by Disney, which was a major move because, you know, Disney being Disney, I mean, you know, one of the largest media companies, one of the most pervasive brands in every single household, pretty much globally in every market. They had the foresight, I guess is the right thinking. They were looking ahead, bottom line. And so when they picked up Maker Studios was the first influencer network on YouTube. Right? The first company that was saying, okay, let's collect this talent. This talent doesn't know how to run a business, right? And this talent needs data in order to make decisions. So they built tools around that. And they were smart. They were really smart. But, you know, it's roughly an $800 million acquisition. It was a serious bet by Disney. And part of my job was to help brands and advertisers who some of them were early doing some interesting things with influencers, but to help them understand, like, how do you approach this space? And it was messy. It was very messy space at the time. Yep. Doing brand integrations and, you know, how do you price it? How do you charge it? Is your brand going to be seen on the screen for a certain period of time? How do you guarantee things? You know, back then it was like, you know, some 23-year-old creator, they didn't even give a shit, right? They didn't care because they were getting their AdSense money, right? And they were automatically being monetized. By the way, they had a hard time connecting the thinking that the same brands that might be coming through automated monetization are the brands that want to put their brand directly in your video, right? Yep. And I'll give you a quick, you know, aha moment in that space. I remember selling a deal to, you know, one of the largest tech companies, computer manufacturers, made tablets, right? I don't want to give too many names and companies here. And we did a pretty major deal. Like at the time they were dabbling, they'd buy a video here and there. And so we did an upfront deal that would cross the year and was, you know, north of 7 figures and included multiple content, multiple talent across different categories. Okay. Right. And leading into the holiday season, we shot with one of the top gamers on YouTube with a massive audience and did the shot, did the video, everything was fine. Video came out, you know, 2 weeks before Christmas, something like that. And then like the week before Christmas, that same talent, that same creator is seen in another creator's channel in a video. And it was real cheeky, man. Like knowing that he got paid to promote this other company's product, he was seen as a character in another video in another channel playing a father during a Christmas scene where his child was unpackaging a product, a gift. And the child opens up the exact product that he was promoting on his channel 2 weeks ago and happens to say, "You're so cheap you couldn't buy me an effing."
Oh, no way. Whoa.
Right. And it, being the person that was in charge of revenue, it was like a ridiculous moment for me from a business perspective.
Do you think then it was influencers back? I mean, it's evolved so much now, but was it more of an entitlement versus value?
Yeah.
It would have to be,
entitlement for sure. Look, there's certainly one thing to be said if you're a creator about controlling your brand and your narrative. Nobody blames you for that. But sort of the entitlement and the arrogance of like, I just got paid, by the way, like $250,000 to make a video. I just got paid all this money to make a video, and then I'm going to go do this because maybe I don't like the company. And that gets me into the areas of influencer marketing that I didn't like then, that I don't like now.
You don't like it now?
Which is one of my least favorite words to use in all of marketing and advertising. It's thrown around all day long, which is authenticity. And being authentic, because you can't be authentic if you are out there as an influencer peddling every single brand in a category.
But it's working though, right, Charles, for Gen Zs?
Yeah, I mean, look, I think what's working is maybe less the content and more of the access.
If, for example, back in one of your touch points, let's just talk about Snoopy.
Yeah. Oh, sure. Yeah.
Yeah.
Spend time with the kids. Kid space. Yeah.
So if Snoopy was an influencer in himself, had a way of engaging with the youth of today who connect with Snoopy as an influencer, you might be able to sell products off the shelves. Right? So it works, right?
But there's a reason.
It's not authentic though either. You can tell. And I think this is where, in the Middle East, influencer marketing is by far one of the biggest forms of media that you can buy. It's like TV outdoor fair, influencers, social. And you're thinking to yourself, wow. I'm with you, by the way. Influencer marketing needs to be seen as authentic, as native as possible, not where something's been shoehorned and you just see multiple goods lined up here. For example, branded products. It just doesn't make sense. It feels so forced. It feels almost like an advertorial done in a different way.
Sure. I mean, look, take two things. One, on Snoopy, it's one of the reasons why that brand is not really commercialized, and they stay away from that stuff. And it's mostly because you got to be very cautious about marketing to kids. But the other is, and I'm trying to think of another brand that's like this. I think Calvin and Hobbes was like this, like just not going to do a lot of work with brands for those reasons. Don't want to be too commercial, want to be authentic to their voice and their characters and their IP. But your point is taken. If I think about, I'm trying to think like a chef, okay? So if you're in the cooking category, right, and you're a known chef, and therefore you're a known quantity, you have an audience, you're on social platforms, and you're using a certain type of knife for your preparation, and you decide, man, this knife's awesome because I'm a chef and this is what I use, and I want to show that to my audience, that's super authentic, right? Because they're actually using it in their everyday life. I think more about other categories where, like, you can't tell me that everything that Kim Kardashian peddles, she actually believes in or uses, right? And I think it could be anybody. I just mentioned Kim just to mention her, but that's sort of the point, right? It's like, I feel like there's so much inauthentic content out there. And by the way, now you add an AI and you just, can replicate that content very, very quickly.
Well, the journey you've been through, we're hopping around here, but you've ended up in the space of AI, right?
Yeah. And again, I think for me, that's always been the goal, is to like continue to work ahead, look ahead, and stay, in front of the curve, so to speak. And in some ways, that's benefited me greatly. In some ways, I might have moved too quickly and should have stayed in certain,
I don't think so.
parts.
For the time I've known you, is you've always been ahead.
Yeah.
From the time at Curiously, which was a super cool piece of tech,
Very.
at the time, and they did some great stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Chris and
Chris and
Gary.
Abraham,
Yeah.
and I'm blanking on the
Gary.
third.
Jerry.
Oh, yeah. Yep. Super smart guys.
Super smart guys, and then on to sort of like Apester, which was again back then. Think back then, Charles, for just a minute. Back then, try and sell to brands to say swipeable content.
I know.
Do you remember?
I know.
Right. Fast
Now
forward.
they'll buy it all day.
They'll buy it all day.
I know.
Like, you remember going into these places, say, "Hey, I've got this new piece of tech to come, and you have these eyeballs, and we can create these audiences, and you'll be 100% with those audiences."
By the way, not just swipeable content, but you could do it yourself.
You could do it yourself as well. Yes.
We'll give you the technology. You're right.
Oh,
you're
wow.
right. Early. And sometimes, this is why startup failure rates are 90+%, right? Because sometimes you're too early. In that case, they might have been too early, but not by much. I mean, you're talking by like 24 months or something like that. Curiously, super interesting, given the fact that the use case of AI today and for consumers is to ask questions, right? And that's what a lot of what Curiously was focused on, was the fact that you can definitively get consumers to answer questions because humans are inherently curious.
They are.
Right.
Very much.
It's interesting to go full circle back to those guys because they had something cool.
Absolutely. And in the space of AI now, just reading a stat here, that's why I was a bit mesmerized.
Yep.
By McKinsey, actually. And
Sure.
they're saying on average, in between the range of 65 to 71% of organizations report regular use of Gen AI. And they believe the value still hinges on integration. Now, you've been very blunt when it comes to AI pilots sort of stalling. There's blockers when it comes to workflows and how it fits with management. What needs to change when it comes to this?
It's a really good question. So I'll also cite a little bit of research and I follow one of the partners in Bain Capital. I also invested in our company, but that's not why I follow her, and she's not related to our investment. MIT put out research that said 95% of all enterprise AI experiments are failing.
95%.
95%. Wow. And the big reason, and there's probably a few reasons, but I would say, and I see this all the time when we scope out deals in my current role, the big reason is they don't always know the problem that they're solving, right? They see cool AI tech and they want to bring it in and they want to pitch it. I think that there's a lot of visionary stuff happening in some of these enterprises, and I'll talk specifically within media and advertising. And I think there's also a lot of fear because the reality now moving forward is if the CMO or the CEO or the chief business officer were like the key decision makers, now it's the CTO, right? The CTO, the CIO, information security, right? The InfoSec people, like this they become really important right now because when it comes to AI use, the big all-in moment is whether or not you're going to use your private data, right? And that's part of the slowdown. I think you have companies, enterprises that have lots of data. We went through at least a decade, if not two, of, especially in our industry, of collecting as much data as you possibly can.
Yep.
Now, that's a good thing, but now that data needs to be AI ready. It needs to be clean. It needs to be formatted well, and it needs to be accessible in the right ways, right? So I would say that companies that are starting to figure it out are starting to realize that it's the unsexy stuff that they have to do first, right? So I'll say two things. I think it's pipes then people, right? Figure out what problem you want to solve. Figure out where the data is and what you need to do with the data to make sure that it's really ready, and go after short-term ROI, right? Because that's the unsexy stuff, because people want to say, oh, great, I'm going to bring AI into my company. I'm going to transform the entire business. I'm going to be able to drop 1,000 employees. I'm going to save a ton of money. I'm going to increase revenue, et cetera, et cetera. But the reality is, if you start with I can bring in AI tools today and save 2 to 5 hours a week per employee on some of their tasks. That's meaningful ROI, period, right? So I do think there's this moonshot thinking that happened first versus let me get some little wins in the door, right? So that's one thing. The other thing that I start to see, again, specific to our industry is volume, right? So we're famous in our industry for big numbers, right?
Yep. Throw me some. Come on.
Everything. But back in the day, it was like if you were an ad network, it was I got 10,000 publishers, right? And the reality, you all know that nobody needs 10,000 publishers, right? Because your average consumer goes to only 10, right? Every marketplace will cite the big numbers of what they have listed there, but you all know that there's a portion of supply that doesn't matter. It might just keep pricing artificially down. So now what I'm starting to see is companies in our industry are creating agents, and the marketing, if you're a holdco or a big agency, might be, I have 10,000 agents. Therefore, we can do, the work better. We have better outcomes. We have better output for our customers. That to me is going to be the next phase of issues, right? So the first phase is of the challenges is not knowing the problem.
Yep.
And very poor deployment, right? Not really aligning internally to properly deploy. And that's why you see a lot of this stuff failing.
So you've hit on a few points. I want to
dig in.
Want to dig in.
Yeah.
The first thing is that AI C-levels have this notion that AI is here and it's about efficiencies. So it's this reduce what I need from a working capital, make some bigger margins. So they're missing the trick. I will cut a workforce. I'll replace it with AI to be able to do half that work. And so maybe in research or maybe in data science or some maybe in those areas. Okay, you've saved a ton of cash, but you're not reinvesting it into new skill sets that are required in AI, right? So that's one thing. The next thing is, whether it's agencies specific to agencies, or as in the media agencies, or just those who work in marketing in general, but we have this sprawl of AI tools. And it's such I mentioned too, I feel it's so fragmented. And now it's about getting on the bandwagon and say, I want this, I want this, I want this to serve my purpose, repackage it, white label it. And next thing you know, you're overwhelmed by a magnitude of different types of AI tools. You don't know what to do with it.
It's a good point. And I don't think it's any different than any other tech shift that we've had in the industry. Right?
You don't think, no?
No, I mean, look, when you shift from display to video, everyone pieced together legacy tech with video serving and video tracking, and now you had all these different systems, and eventually that collapses into one system. So I think it's sort of part of the nature of change.
Okay.
You're empowering your businesses to go do things, and you're not thinking about it from the top down necessarily. So what do you get? You get teams that use different tools for different purposes. You get, in our world, agencies building agents for brands that are doing certain tasks. That might be a really good thing to drive efficiency or to drive outcomes. However, and I recently spoke to a major agency CEO about this, and what he saw as part of the problem is now they're losing consistency and methodology. The consistency in the same role and function across any client in the company is now changing. In each team, they're now doing the role differently, or they're doing the task differently because they're empowered to use different tools. So I think that can be a challenge. I think interoperability is probably the bigger challenge, right? So if you're now in a company, in an enterprise where you are, maybe you have some central system for some stuff, but then you're adding in different AI tools, they need to be interoperable, right? If you're working on one task and your mate's working on another task, but you're dealing with the same client, The AI that you're using needs to be able to know what one is doing and what the other is doing so that the end output to the client, whatever that might be, it can understand every single task that's happening around that brand,
Yep.
right? So if it's planning, it's strategy, it's building creative, it's buying, it's targeting, whatever that is, you need these tools to be interoperable if you want to really be good at using AI. And when they're not interoperable, then they're not accessing. If you built an audience with AI, then maybe your buy side isn't accessing that data, right? Or you built an audience with AI and now you need to create a media plan for that audience, but now you're starting from scratch because that particular agent doesn't work with this agent.
Yep.
So I think volume of agents versus true agentic workflows, and that's the direction of travel, is into agentic workflows. And that means that companies have to have at least the idea that they're going to take an entire workflow across the company and help automate that workflow.
But you run the risk of, so we did like creativity fit in all this.
Yeah.
Okay. Because it has to be product first.
Yeah.
Whether you're the agency, whether you're the client, or whether you're a brand, whatever, product first. And you see this a lot now. In some organizations, some brands are driven by product. You mentioned CTOs now are at the top of the table. They're calling the shots to say, actually, for us to evolve our product in AI, I need a task force of, double the amount I have today year on year, and I need investment of 3 times the amount of that, right?
Yep. And they have to deploy the money.
They have to deploy the money. Mm-hmm. But you have organizations where, and I think it's the right thing to do for now, because I still think we're the guinea pigs of AI, is, okay, I got a bunch of AI tools now. My team are having not just to endorse it, but upskill themselves in it. So how do you get teams to upskill themselves in it without having to replace them with people who are already maybe so versed in it?
Yeah, look, I think...
Especially in advertising.
Yeah. I mean, philosophically, it's that's where we're at as a company. And I'll talk about us in a little bit, but you got to have human in the loop right now. And human creativity is what makes us different than artificial intelligence, right? So it's one of the main things, I think. And so when you think about giving AI context for a task, that has to come from the human, right? You need the creativity around that. Now, once AI has enough context for a certain task, it could potentially, just continue to automate that task. But how you query, how you prompt, the type of context you provide, that's all within the control of the human and the human in the loop, which means that, and you said product first, and you have different schools of thought here, right? Some believe that, UI will eventually sort of disappear, right? But the reality is currently, I think UI is critical because you do have so many employees that might understand a little bit about Gen AI. The reality is most don't in terms of how it really works.
That's what I mean. We're guinea pigs.
Yeah, guinea pigs for sure. And they might be using a little bit in their personal life, and they might be using a little bit for certain tasks, typically research, typically writing when it comes to work. You need to train them now. Right. Yeah. Because I do think, and we can find research on this, but like in my mind, the cost of getting rid of employees and rehiring new employees with AI skills, I would imagine this new crop employees are going to cost a lot.
It'll cost a lot, but they may not have the deep understanding of the industry per se.
Absolutely.
Especially in marketing, right?
Absolutely. And that's where experience comes in. But look what's happening in the engineering space. Yeah. Right? Like, Zuck and everyone, they're given $1 billion packages, $100 million packages. I can't remember if it was Microsoft or OpenAI. One of them was like, you get $1.5 million bonus just for staying a year, right? So if the engineer, and by the way, talent is always talent and time, of course, but talent is a limited resource, right? So it's limited in engineering, which means for sure it's limited on the business side for people that can understand the technology and be able to pitch it, sell it, present it. And then it's going to be limited in the people that need to train, enable, drive customer success. So I do think that human in the loop right now is important, which means product is important, which means UI is important because UI establishes adoption. It's a lot easier for you to get your current workforce to adopt something that's easy to use than it is to put something in their hands that maybe you homegrown or built internally that still looks like you need to be an ad operations expert to be able to actually use.
So if you had to take one AI use case out of say, an agency today, just to sort of hit the reset button, what would it be?
All right, let me think about this.
I purposely threw a curveball there.
Yeah. I mean, well, look, when I think about the advertising and media landscape, and if you want to talk about agencies, like I think the obvious stuff is to go to creative first with AI, right? Because you can version and you can create assets very, very quickly at a lower cost. And I don't know if there is. My caution even with that would be how you deploy the technology internally and who, your permissions and who gets to use it, because that's where you probably have to be a little bit cautious because the reality behind AI and creativity and AI and content is that it can create some cool shit.
Of course.
Doesn't always get it right. And there's an example, you can look this up, of like AI creating a Coca-Cola ad, and real quick look, it's the polar bear and the Coke, and like it looks amazing. You're like, oh wait, this is great. Display ad, image ad. But then if you look closer, the Coca-Cola logo is actually incorrect, right? So you still need the human knowledge behind this kind of stuff. Now, your question is sort of like, what would you change?
What one AI use case would you ban for a short period of time?
That's a tough one, because I don't know that I'd ban anything.
Well, you know what I would ban? I would ban something like Journify or something like that, in the sense of being able to prompt how you might want to think of a concept. So for where I'm on the fences, and I've had many discussions with people in the past on the show, which is, for me, what got me into advertising originally all these years back was the Mad Men approach, where you'd be sitting with a client that will have maybe 12 people from their side, and you've got the executive director, creative director, and then you as a media agency are there as well. And you hear the passion from the creative agency, having worked on maybe like a brand relaunch script for 2 months, but the client needed it yesterday, and they've got 3 different versions of it, and with that, they're, showing their passion behind each concept, and you hear them, just the way they narrate it. I think, wow, this is so cool. Can you just imagine, guys, if one of these actually went live? We might have to go to Portugal, we might have to go to the Middle East or somewhere just to do these shoots. And even that, just this whole storytelling, it gives you goosebumps.
Sure.
Now with AI, human
creativity.
Yeah, it's infinite thinking from the AI in some capacity, but that thinking and that sort of authenticity is kind of sort of diminished over time, or it is diminishing over time. I like to think it's not. And for any creative, thinkers out there, creative directors and so forth, this is not me criticizing in any shape or form, because they do an amazing job in the short space of time that they're given, even by some of their clients.
Sure.
But it's just the whole ad and marketing industry was always about pushback, throwback, time constraints. Let's just get it done. And once you crack it, then it's such a great sense of achievement. I just feel that that's one thing I would want to take out for a short period of time, just to illustrate how valuable the human creative thinking actually was and still is.
Yeah, I don't disagree. I mean, again, I'm not on the creative side of the world, but I do think there's a lot of challenges there where companies are going to lean on the AI for creative, and I do think that human creativity needs to play a major part. I think maybe, and this is the other C word after creativity and connection, is probably curation. You can use AI to come up with a fantastic set of taglines for a brand launch, let's say, right?
Yep.
But somebody still needs to pick it. Right?
True.
So you can ask it for the top 10, but somebody needs to be responsible for thinking ahead, having that imagination of what's going to happen when I release this into the world. And maybe they have scenario planning with their AI. Maybe they look at scenarios. I don't know. But somebody still needs to pick it.
Would you never go back to the days of just having like 5 TV channels and no streaming platforms.
Well, that was when probably if you're a media planner, you want to go back to those days. That made sales easy too. No, we're never going to get back that. I think you are coming back to a place of dominant players again, because the folks that control the models are going to continue to be the dominant players. But so just talking about enterprises and AI, I wanted to mention a couple of quick things, right?
Yep.
So I don't know that I'd ban anything, right?
Okay.
To your question. What I would do is I'd move much faster in removing legacy systems, legacy process, because that's the stuff that you're going to see the major transformation with.
Do you still see that in agencies or
everywhere? I think you see it I think you see
Yeah.
it everywhere. I think legacy technology systems, which comes with a certain amount of tech debt, processes that are outdated that probably haven't been changed in a while. Again, I brought up mass data. You're going to need to curate that data. There's a concept I talked to a very serious brand leader about a little while back called lakes to libraries, right?
Okay.
You need to go from the data lake to like creating these really good context-based libraries. And part of that is because if you're really going to deploy AI across lots of workflows, it isn't about the amount of data. It's about giving it the right amount of context for the job not giving it too much and not giving it too little. So that's something. But there's a quote here, and this actually funny comes from Sonia, who's one of the partners at Bain. But she said, deploying AI in a legacy org is like bolting a rocket onto a horse cart. The thrust is there, but the frame collapses.
Wow. That's a
And
statement.
I
That's
found that
bold.
really powerful
Yeah.
because if you're going to really change, now is the time that you have to go all in.
You have to break down your frameworks then, right?
I think and almost rebuild the enterprise.
So this
in
is the
some ways.
thing. I just feel there's elements that we're shoehorning, trying to shoehorn it in.
Everyone is. That's exactly right. And I think part of that goes back to not really knowing the problem you're trying to solve. And there's really good early mover information out there, but Chase is the one that sticks out the most to me. And there's a reasonable case study on what they did, and I think Jamie Dimon, like him, don't like him, whatever, he should get a pat on the back for the moves that he's made. They went all in like right away, and so what they were looking at is they had traditional process, they had manual workflows, and they had compliance bottlenecks, and they wanted to try to solve for that.
Yep.
Okay, for those three things. Part of their solution happened to be a significant amount of capital they could invest, so $2 billion in an annual investment in AI. Okay, now that seems like a crazy amount, but again, think about what we're talking about here. You're talking about the future of your business, right? You also look at even within our industry, you have $300-400 million a year being spent on AI platforms, right? And I'm going to get to build versus buy in a second because I think this is an important factor. So $2 billion annual investment with deployment over 200,000 employees. So they weren't taking like a sample test group of 10 people to say, hey, let's see how this works. They were going to go on. Here's the results.
Okay.
83% reduction in their research time.
Wow. 80%.
83. 2 billion plus in productivity gains. 15 million plus hours saved annually across their business. 1.5 billion in fraud protection. 450 plus current AI use cases in production.
Shit, that's a ton.
Right. And that's going all in, right?
That's massive.
It is. And it's incredible. And I again, like, the finance sector, you're talking about major data security and privacy, right? So
Absolutely.
which is table stakes, I think, in the world of AI. But they went all in and it worked. And I think early adopters tend to win big.
I think fintech is actually, if we were to think of a category, I'm not saying traditional banks. I mean, that's a great traditional bank that has transformed itself. But new fintech, because it's become also quite fragmented in terms of the number of fintechs out there, are putting AI first in a lot of their tech, from user experience right through to data, And you just remind me on a few things that I need to follow up on when it comes to data in itself at fintech, because you're right. Data is actually the epicenter for a lot of things. And data governs product. And product governs outcomes for consumers. And consumers govern revenue for companies at the end of the day. And it's a nice chain reaction there. Look, we started off this segment talking about connectivity and connection.
Creativity and connection.
Take that back.
Yeah, all good.
So we opened the theme, which was all about connection, creativity. And, before we're coming towards the end of our show, but what I would like to ask you, if you're a leader today, going in on Monday, let's just say, consider this week as a write-off, but you want to start a fresh week next week, with that ethos of connection and creativity, what's the first thing they should be thinking about or looking to change?
I mean, I think number one, you have to go in and dispel the fear that AI is going to replace people. I do think AI will have some replacement level, but it will create new jobs. And now is the opportunity for people to take on that learning so that they're in those roles, right? Or so that their role evolves with AI, right? So that would be the first thing as a leader that I'd want to convey. The second thing would be that there is no better time than now, which means we have to experiment, and we have to experiment quickly, and we have to know what we're trying to solve and start with small things, right? Start with small things. You don't have to go so big. But the reality is, if you make small impacts across the organization, you are going to transform the organization. I would also say that equally as important in any of these decisions, if you're going to bring in new technology, new tools, or try to augment what you're currently using, is change management, product design, and then training.
Change management, yeah.
Big time. I think it has to be planned for, because you're talking about the biggest transformation in the history of mankind is what you're talking about.
What if a current leader is just like, man, I want to get to grips with AI. I want to immersify myself in AI. You can't replace a guy, right?
I mean, look, you're going to have companies, you're going to have executives dip the toe and take a slow approach. It's going to happen, right? I just think that this is the wrong time to be that person.
Wow. Okay, I wasn't expecting that. I was just even thinking like Steve Jobs, God bless him, like if he was around today, would he have to be replaced?
I don't think so, because he's got the vision that can look ahead and say, as an example, if today the vision within our industry is how do we automate creative, how do we improve our workflows, save time, be more efficient, get faster insights into our clients' hands, right? All of that, right? And how do we use AI to do that, right? If that's the current challenge. The next thing that everyone else is thinking about, including my company, is, okay, now you're going to need agent governance, right? You're going to need a system that's going to govern the agents, right? And then the agents need to work together. And then the agents need to communicate. And then eventually, where we will likely get to, whether this is good or bad, I don't know, but eventually you might be marketing to an agent.
Oh, gee.
Right? So think about a consumer workflow.
That's a good point.
Right? If you can ask, again, I'm making this part up, but this is coming. If you can ask your phone, and it has built-in AI, whatever the AI is, whatever the models are, doesn't matter. If you can say, hey, book me a hotel, book me the dinner reservation, buy me this, order my lunch, whatever that action is, that AI then needs to go do the research, take the action, right? Okay, well, so now if you're Uber Eats or you're, one of these delivery services, who are you marketing to?
Yeah, fair.
Right? Because I'm not making the choice anymore.
But you want it to be able to know your personal choice, personal taste, personal brands that you like, and
Sure.
but
the AI will know that.
Will know that.
So think about it. Eventually, brands may have to market.
I quite like that in
to
a
an
way.
agent. It's interesting.
I actually quite like that in a way, because the future of like what goes beyond e-commerce now, it could be agent commerce, right, or some form.
Yeah.
Which is nuts. So then you as a consumer can just wow, just imagining my life like that. I'd be so chilled. You don't need your Amex concierge anymore, Charles.
Yeah, nope, definitely not.
You don't need that anymore, right?
Definitely not.
Which you've had for quite some time, right?
No, yeah, but and I'll cap with the build versus buy conversation and back into your notion of leadership and what would you do today. AI native companies have a massive advantage over legacy enterprises, and I think the build versus buy conversation is very, very big. Right, because a lot of companies want to build it. It is some of this technology might be too important to not own in certain sectors, but I think you have to balance that out.
But even
you can get some stuff right now.
I agree, and I think in my time in the journeys that I've had with you in the past, and you're working with you've worked and still work with some remarkable leaders and founders. Honestly, like I think if I was to say in my contact list of who has been there, it'd be you. You'd be like topping on that list when it comes to, working with some exciting people, front edge technology. Like, just have to name where you've been, and
I've been lucky.
You've been very lucky, and I've been lucky to work with you in that journey, in some of those journeys, and even get to know what you're doing right now. And through some of those moments that even I've encountered with you, where you're hustling and you want to, you're trying to sort of, showcase a new way of thinking. And we go back to that whole swipeable content moment, right? Mm-hmm. And now you're in AI and data and all this on that side. The stigma I find with big organizations is I think, is it more of hesitancy of new blue chip companies that are coming in that are even miles ahead of, you mentioned legacy firms, legacy tech that are looking to build on top and build on top and build on top. But you've got blue chip companies that are coming in from a zero base of tech that they've built from the ground up. Mm-hmm. Where does this change? I mean, in the US, are you seeing this still to be the case? Which is
that's why I said AI native companies have a massive advantage. I mean, they just do. You likely need less employees. You're using AI for everything.
Yeah.
And that's back to the build versus buy. I think there's certain things that you need to invest in and build. And I think there's things that you absolutely have to buy in AI right now and look ahead and, talk about where I'm at for a second. So, my company Accio, going on its 6th year. And actually we just got a patent, recently, but these guys were doing chat to chart before ChatGPT ever came out, right? So they were already using chat function, already leveraging language models to be able to produce graphs and charts and access data in different ways and manipulate data, right? I think where they've gotten to and why we have such a unique solution for marketing and advertising is you have a very easy to use no-code platform. Their background is taking complex tech and making it simple to use, which increases adoption. And it is an AI native application. So we have presented it to the market as, look, we're white labeled. We become part of your tech solution. Yep. And this is the big reality. It's like your data as a company, your knowledge in your process and how you do things and how you train your employees, that's your differentiator, right? Look at the world of CRMs. Everyone will use a Salesforce as an example,
yep.
right? But how you use it, how you customize it, the inputs you put into it, that determines like how well you use that platform and that software. And this is going to be similar with companies' AI technology. Mm-hmm. And Jamie Dimon had a quote about this. He said, and let me just look real quick, but he said, most AI runs on public data, ours runs on JP Morgan data. And the data itself becomes a unique differentiator. So true. But also your company's knowledge and your process.
Which is immense.
Yep. And look, you being on the agency side for a long time, right? Part of any team when you're trying to win business is the team. Yeah. It's the people. These are this is your differentiation is the people. It's like if you look at sports teams, right? They all got money. They all got audiences. The reality is the players that make the difference.
That's so true.
So that's still going to continue to be the case in AI adoption. The talent is going to be the difference. The data is going to be the difference. And we're believers in that. And our belief is that we can very quickly help the transformation case for a lot of enterprises.
And I've seen it. I've seen what guys are capable of, and I was mesmerized when you showed me, I think at the beginning of this year.
Yeah, you got an early look. Yeah,
Yeah,
it's true.
it was really good. Look, we can go on for hours.
course.
And I can always talk to you for hours. That's the thing. And,
Yeah,
you know, I
it's fun,
definitely
man.
can,
I like
honestly.
it.
Like,
Thank you.
It's been after so long. I just want to have a bit of fun before we end
Sure.
this. I've got 2 cards here.
Oh boy.
Okay.
All right. What do we got?
Very random now. You're going to choose one of these cards.
Okay.
And beneath each card of these cards actually has something that's been written.
Okay.
Okay. One is a question by a previous guest
Okay.
for you to answer. Another one will be a question that has been source using AI, actually.
Okay.
Okay.
All right.
So let me
Close
put these
my
here.
eyes.
And you can,
I didn't see how you mixed them up.
there you go.
All right. I can pick one?
Yep, of course.
All right.
Let's see what this one is.
Let's see. Wow. Okay. Have you ever experienced imposter syndrome? That's an amazing question, by the way.
Is it? Yeah.
It really, really is. And 1,000% have I experienced imposter syndrome. I think that when you're trying to build your career and you're trying to break through, I think everybody will have a little bit of this if they're doing it right. And the reason why I think that is because in order for you to grow and take leaps and bounds versus just sort of climbing the ladder historically, you got to put yourself in uncomfortable situations.
Yeah.
And in order to do that, sometimes you have to fake it till you make it, and sometimes you have to play the imposter. So if I interpreted the question right, I definitely have experienced that. There's no doubt about it. Because again, I'm always trying to stay ahead of the curve, which means oftentimes I am trying to teach, convince, educate, sell while I'm learning at the same time.
Yeah. Imposter syndrome.
And it goes back to something else that you and I talked about at some point, which is I'm a big believer in experience as the educator, right?
Yes, you did say that, right?
Yep.
And I was thinking about that, like, experience is the educator. But then at school, what would you have done differently then?
I don't think I would have done anything differently. I think that people at different times in their life realize that learning how to learn is the real thing that you're trying to figure out when you're in school. And I think once you learn how to learn, it doesn't really matter what the topic is. You've heard of the rule of 100? So the rule of 100 states that if you do something 20 minutes a day for 100 days in a row, it doesn't matter what it is, you'll be better than 95% of the people at it, right? So experience and how you learn and your method of learning matters probably far more than whatever the textbooks tell you.
So Charles, thank you so much for bringing the New York City vibe into Brew Bytes. It's been a pleasure to have you on the show.
Thank you.
I've thoroughly enjoyed it. I've took a lot of inspiration in terms of your journey, and I've took a lot of aspiration in terms of what we have got coming up. That's very, very exciting, especially where you have been and with your time right now at Accio. I think it's just testament to, you know, the journey that you've had and how you're able to sort of take those life experiences from one to another, and no doubt wherever you are, you know, they take a lot of value from you. And for the viewers and listeners who are watching, I'm sure you have taken something from this, even if it's an ounce of inspiration or, you know, a ton of aspiration. If you're feeling it, if you feel something there that you can take from it, feel free to like, subscribe, and until next time, bye.